everyone, welcome to Battleground MTG. On today's episode, I want to walk you through the Ukraine war. This has been going on for almost 15 months now, and unfortunately, every single American is paying for it. I just want to remind every single one of you, I never voted for 1 penny of your hard-earned tax dollars to go to the war in Ukraine. It's not because I don't have a heart for the Ukrainian people, but it's because I care more about our country and the suffering that we're going through. But I think it's important for me to go through and elaborate where this war is today, how much money is being spent, the involvement of our country, the real truth on the ground in the war, and where it's going in the future. I think it is one of the biggest problems that we have.
None of us enjoy cleaning our bathroom, our showers, our kitchen. TheSimpleScrub.com has the solution. It's called The Simple Scrub. Their website, TheSimpleScrub.com. What a fantastic cleaning device. It makes cleaning around your pools, your bathrooms, even the baseboards, detachable heads for any surface. TheSimpleScrub.com. They've got 2 sizes for you. Go check it out. The guys over at The Simple Scrub have developed this specifically to make your life easier and to clean your kitchen, bathroom, and around your house. TheSimpleScrub.com. Go to the website, put in the code word BATTLE for a savings. You won't regret it. TheSimpleScrub.com, keyword BATTLE.
Now, I want to start by reminding you that President Trump only wanted $5 billion for a border wall at the southern border when he was president. $5 billion. But yet today, the United States has funded the Ukrainian war at $113 billion. Can you imagine? That's unbelievable. But here's something else you probably don't know. Most Americans don't know that our country, the United States of America, sends $1 billion every single month to Ukraine. $1 billion of your hard-earned tax dollars goes to prop up the government of Ukraine. This isn't for the war effort. This isn't for ammunition. This isn't for aid. This doesn't help anyone. $1 billion a month pays for the Ukrainian government. It keeps the lights on in their building. It pays the salaries of their government officials. It pays for their retirement. Your tax dollars do that. That's on top of the $113 billion that Democrats, the Biden administration, and Republicans too have all voted to send to Ukraine. And again, I'll remind you, I never voted to send 1 single penny of your hard-earned dollars to Ukraine. I would have much rather seen it go to President Trump's border wall, because I think that's where it belongs. We should be defending our country's border and our people, not another country's border. And again, I'm going to tell you I think the war is wrong. But I'd like to talk a little further about what our Secretary of State says about the war. Secretary Blinken just recently was talking about the war. He says there should be no ceasefire. He says there should be no peace talks. And I find that appalling and disgusting. I don't know what is wrong with Washington, D.C., where all of our government officials, the Biden administration and many others, the State Department, the Pentagon, they are obsessed with killing people over in Ukraine. They don't even want to talk about peace. They don't want to talk about a ceasefire. They just want to continue to fight, continue to fund a war so that more people die every single day. Here's Secretary Blinken in his own words.
The United States, together with our allies and partners, is firmly committed to supporting Ukraine's defense today, tomorrow, for as long as it takes. And in America, this support is bipartisan. And precisely because we have no illusions about Putin's aspirations, we believe the prerequisite for meaningful diplomacy and real peace is a stronger Ukraine. America and our allies and partners are helping meet Ukraine's needs on the current battlefield while developing a force that can deter and defend against aggression for years to come. That means helping build a Ukrainian military of the future with long-term funding, a strong air force centered on modern combat aircraft, an integrated air and missile defense network, advanced tanks and armored vehicles, national capacity to produce ammunition, and the training and support to keep forces and equipment combat ready. Some countries will call for a ceasefire. And on the surface, That sounds sensible, attractive even. After all, who doesn't want warring parties to lay down their arms? Who doesn't want the killing to stop? But a ceasefire that simply freezes current lines in place and enables Putin to consolidate control over the territory he seized and then rest, rearm, and reattack, that is not a just and lasting peace. It's a Potemkin peace. It would legitimize Russia's land grab, it would reward the aggressor, and punish the victim.
Now, I'd like to ask the question, after hearing Secretary Blinken say this, how on earth does Washington, D.C. keep demanding war in another country, not our own? Ukraine is not the 51st state of the United States of America. Ukraine is not even on our continent. They're across the ocean over in Eastern Europe. How can our country keep demanding war? But let's talk about who are the people that they are supporting. Who are the people they're funding war for? And what kind of people fight in the Ukrainian army? Here, I want to tell you about what the New York Times said in June of 2023. They said even Jewish groups and anti-hate organizations that have traditionally called out hateful symbols have stayed largely silent. Privately, some leaders have worried about being seen as embracing Russian propaganda talking points. That was the New York Times in June 2023. Do you want to know what they're talking about? They're talking about the fact that everyone is trying to hide. It's the fact that there are Nazis in the Ukrainian army. And there's not just a few of them. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of them. And this isn't anything new. This has been widely known for years. People in our press used to talk about it. This was an issue that they even would report widely. Times Magazine made a documentary talking all about the Nazis in Ukraine. Nazis. Can you believe that our government is funding a military with Nazis? This comes after the heels of years and years and years of Democrats, media personalities, Hollywood celebrities accusing President Trump of being a Nazi, even going so far as to call him Hitler. These same people have called me a Nazi. They've called other Republicans Nazis, which is abhorrent. These are horrible, hurtful names to call me, to call President Trump, to call anybody in our country, because all of us reject that type of ideology. We reject that type of racism. We reject that type of hate. We remember World War I and World War II that defeated the Nazis, that defeated Hitler. But yet American hard-earned tax dollars are funding Ukraine, funding a war with Nazis. Here, take a look at the Times documentary, and you'll see for yourself the Nazis in Ukraine that they used to talk about all the time, but now they keep quiet, and they don't call them out.
It seemed like an odd way to spend a Saturday, watching the blood sports at a festival for far-right extremists. This was the summer of 2019, and I'd gone to Ukraine to learn more about these groups. From the crowds, one thing seemed pretty clear about them. They weren't bothered by the fact that this event was organized by the Azov movement, a far-right group that has increasingly been linked to violence around the world.
The shooter is linked to a 74-page manifesto filled with white supremacist rhetoric.
FBI agents say he expressed a desire to travel to Ukraine to fight with a far-right paramilitary group.
At least one member of an American hate group also trained in Ukraine, with Azov Battalion.
The group emerged from the revolution that swept across Ukraine in 2014, and it has gotten a lot stronger amid the ongoing war with pro-Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. The symbols on their flags have been especially controversial. Azov says it combines the letters I and N for idea of nation, but extremism experts see it as an emblem of Nazism.
The official symbol of Azov, it's a version of Volksangel. It was one of the symbols of one of SS division during the World War II. It is one of more or less usual symbols for neo-Nazi groups all over the world.
And it's not just about their symbols. When it was founded in 2014, Azov drew many of its commanders and recruits from Ukraine's most notorious far-right groups, including outright neo-Nazis. Azov's paramilitary wing is now a major fighting force, with its own bases and training grounds near the front lines of the war against pro-Russian forces. But their plans in Ukraine are ambitious.
Well, now that you know that there are real Nazis in the Ukrainian army, and that you know that 113 billion of your hard-earned tax dollars are paying for it, and now that you know that you're funding their government for $1 billion every single month, let's talk about how many people are dying as a result of our country's involvement against a very big superpower, a Russian nuclear army. This is so terrifying to me. I can't even believe it's happening. Let's talk about this as they're pushing forward in what's called the counteroffensive. I'm sure you've heard about it on the news. They all talk about the counteroffensive is coming. The counteroffensive is coming. Well, let's talk about the counteroffensive and watch this video here as they tell you how many people die.
Ukrainian President Zelensky issuing a grim warning ahead of that long-awaited counteroffensive against Russian forces. Zelensky signaling that his troops are ready, but telling the Wall Street Journal that, quote, a large number of soldiers will die. ABC's Tom Sufi-Burridge on the ground in Ukraine.
A dramatic search for survivors ongoing tonight. A Russian missile hitting this residential building in Dnipro. 20 wounded, say officials, including children. President Zelensky releasing the video, calling it a terrorist attack. It comes with Ukraine escalating strikes over its border into Russia. Officials in the Russian region of Belgorod saying 2 more civilians killed by Ukrainian shelling. Ukraine also ramping up long-range missile strikes on Russian-occupied southern Ukraine ahead of its counter-offensive. Explosions and smoke rising in videos circulating online. President Zelensky telling the Wall Street Journal his forces are now ready for that offensive, but warning it could come at a heavy cost. Even in this village cemetery, there are the graves of 6 recently killed Ukrainian soldiers. President Zelensky warning that many more Ukrainian soldiers will be killed in the counter-offensive if Ukraine cannot challenge Russia's dominance in the skies. But the White House this week addressing the concern that advancing Ukrainian ground forces could be vulnerable to Russian warplanes, saying Ukraine has the necessary air defense capabilities to go on the attack. And officials say 3 children are in a serious condition in hospital after that Russian missile strike in Dnipro, and a baby could be under the rubble. Whit?
That's just awful news there. Tom Sufi-Burridge, thank you.
It's amazing to me, as you watch that video, and I watched it too, that they just talk about people dying. They're talking about soldiers dying on the Ukrainian side, Russian soldiers dying, and then they're talking about innocent civilians dying. They're even talking about families dying and a baby being buried in the rubble. This is unbelievably horrific. But what does Washington do? No, Washington continues to beat the drums of war because they're addicted to killing. They're addicted to the bloodlust that it brings them.
Now you are free.
Yes.
And we will be.
And the Russians are dying. It's the best money we've ever spent.
And so they continue to demand more money for Ukraine. You saw Lindsey Graham on the House floor of the Senate last week demanding money for Ukraine when it came to our debt ceiling, which is ridiculous.
There's not one penny in this bill for Ukrainian assistance. As I speak tonight, Ukraine's engaged in a fight for its life. They're going on the offensive. I have high hopes in the coming days or weeks they will liberate part of their territory occupied by Russia. Victory for Ukraine.
They all want more money, more weapons, everything for Ukraine, and they'll stick with it as long as they can, as long as it takes, they say.
We're going to continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
We're going to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. For as long as it takes.
We will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. For as long as it takes.
We will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. For as long as it takes.
We are going to support Ukraine as long as it takes.
For as long as it takes.
For as long as it takes.
Well, let's bring things back to reality. I want to talk about someone that just recently gave a very long talk about the reality of the Ukrainian and Russian war. This is not just a right-winger. This isn't a left-winger. This isn't a progressive. This isn't a conservative. This is a former fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations. His name is John Mearsheimer. He's a professor at the University of Chicago, political scientist. He's involved in international relations and something called a realist school of thought. And it's refreshing to listen to this man talk about reality. Let's talk about the real numbers of people that are dying. Now, while you're constantly told on the news and you're constantly told by the Twitter profiles with the Ukraine flag and a couple of other emojis in their profile, and they lecture you and proclaim that Ukraine is winning the war. They're beating Russia. And they talk about how the death ratio is 7-1, where 7 Russians are dying to every 1 Ukrainian. The reality, John Mearsheimer explains, is it's really more like 2-1, only it's flipped. It's more like 2 Ukrainians are dying to every 1 Russian. And this comes with the United States of America and NATO funding this war and saying, oh, there's no end in sight. But what John Mearsheimer explains in a very long talk that he gave in his speech, he says it's not Ukraine winning the war. It's actually Russia winning the war. Take a look at what he had to say.
The artillery imbalance. Almost all of the reports on that balance say the number is either 5-1, 7-1, or maybe 10-1 in the Russians' favor. This has massive consequences. Think about what this war is all about. It's 2 armies standing toe-to-toe, trying to kill each other with massive amounts of firepower. And one side has a 5-1 or a 7-1 or a 10-1 advantage. The side that's on the lower end of that ratio is in the deep kimchi. And by the way, that country that's on the downside of that ratio in artillery also is on the downside in the population ratio. The Ukrainians often say, and it's reported frequently in the West, that 7 Russians die for every 1 Ukrainian. This is ludicrous. 7 Russians die for every 1 Ukrainian, given that artillery imbalance? This fails the common sense test. I think that the exchange ratio is more like 2-1. I think that 2 Ukrainians probably die for every 1 Russian. I have a number of friends who believe the number is higher. It's more like 3-1, maybe even 4-1. Again, just given those artillery figures, it's got to be 2-1 at least. I think the Russians are going to win on the battlefield. They will end up winning this war.
Well, that was refreshing to hear somebody talk about reality, wasn't it? It's too bad they don't have a heavy dose of that in Washington, D.C. No, they're prepping for the counteroffensive, and that's all they're talking about because supposedly it starts in June. And they think that will, help Ukraine win. But really, we know that they're not winning, no matter how much we are helping them, actually funding and controlling it even. But let's talk about what they want. We have General Milley here, who is all for the war in Ukraine, talking about how we sent the Abrams tanks. And now there's a lot of talk in Washington about sending F-16s, American-made F-16 fighter jets, giving them to Ukraine, training the Ukrainian pilots so that they can fly our very expensive, very difficult to maneuver. It takes years of training to learn to fly these airplanes.
There is no basis upon which there is a rationale, according to our military now, to provide F-16s.
But you're not ruling it out?
I am ruling it out for now.
For now.
But no longer. The administration now says they hope Ukrainian pilots can begin training in the coming weeks.
But these people in Washington want to give Ukraine F-16s. But here General Milley is saying, oh, well, this won't be enough in time. It's not enough because General Milley is laying the groundwork for Abrams tanks is not enough. F-16s is not enough. There's going to have to be future American involvement because that's where this seems to go. Isn't that what they're saying when they're saying as long as it takes, whatever it takes, that they'll do anything, whatever it takes to win this so-called war, proxy war against nuclear-armed Russia in Ukraine? I think that's the truth. I think that's exactly what they're telling us. But here's the real issue. I want to dive into something else, and this is what terrifies me. This is changing everything in the world. And I warned of this. I warned of this over a year ago when it started. My messaging was, I'll never vote for a penny to go to this war in Ukraine. You want to know why? It does nothing for our country. It does nothing for our border. And I didn't vote for any of your hard-earned tax dollars to go to this war for another reason. I warned of the economic dangers, and the economic dangers are real. This is why it's real. See, here in America, a lot of people are very concerned about our economy. They're concerned about our future. They're so concerned because in America, we used to have our dollar was backed by gold. And then that changed in the 1970s. And now the Federal Reserve just prints money constantly. And this puts so many Americans terrified for our economic future. They're terrified about their 401ks, their retirement plans, and their investments. Many Americans, because of the instability created by the stupid decisions made in Washington, D.C., many Americans buy gold because that's the only thing they know they can depend on if things go bad. They know if they own gold that they'll have a currency that they can trade in.
The Biden economy is getting hammered by crisis after crisis. Banks are failing, inflation is out of control, and astronomical debt threatens to choke off Social Security and your retirement funds. Instead of the government helping you out on these things, well, they're actually targeting your 401ks with heavy new taxes to pay for their social justice agenda. Now, the good news is there's a little known strategy that can help you protect your savings. I'm talking about the IRA, gold-backed IRA from our friends over at American Heart for Gold. Now, this strategy can shield your wealth from the looming economic meltdown. And the best part is it's tax and penalty free. That's right, tax and penalty free. Now, analysts predict that gold will hit an all-time high. So now is the time to take advantage of this. You cannot risk your retirement savings. Our friends over at American Heart for Gold want to send you some information. They are the expert. It's in gold and precious metals. Our friends over at American Heart for Gold right now, they'll show you how you can diversify your portfolio by using precious metals and gold. All you have to do is simply text the words BATTLE to 65532. That's BATTLE to 65532. They will send you a free information kit. And better yet, you can qualify. You may qualify for $5,000 in silver on your first order. Our friends over at American Heart for Gold. Don't forget, text the words BATTLE to 65532.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0. When I invented My Pillow, it had everything you'd ever want in a pillow. Well, now there's new technology that makes it even better. My Pillow 2.0 has my patented fill combined with a cooling fabric with temperature regulating thread. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.
None of us enjoy cleaning our bathroom, our showers, our kitchen. TheSimpleScrub.com has the solution. It's called The Simple Scrub. Their website, TheSimpleScrub.com. What a fantastic cleaning device. It makes cleaning around your pools, your bathrooms, even the baseboards, detachable heads for any surface. TheSimpleScrub.com. They've got 2 sizes for you. Go check it out. The guys over at The Simple Scrub have developed this specifically to make your life easier and to clean your kitchen, bathroom, and around your house. TheSimpleScrub.com. Go to the website, put in the code word BATTLE for a savings. You won't regret it. TheSimpleScrub.com, keyword BATTLE.
But what's happened is with this American-supported war in Ukraine against nuclear-armed Russia and the sanctions that the Biden administration put in place on Russia over a year ago, We have pushed Russia into the arms of our real enemy, and that's China. And now China, Russia, and other countries have formed something called BRICS. BRICS is BRICS. That stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Saudi Arabia. This is an alliance of these very powerful countries, and the United States is not involved. As a matter of fact, the United States is not wanted because the BRICS alliance, their agreement is a trade agreement between these countries, and it's a very serious trade agreement. And here's why it's dangerous to all of us as Americans. Their agreement between themselves is that they will trade between their countries, not on the US dollar, but on their own currency. Now, this is what the American involvement in the Ukraine war has done. This is what the Biden administration sanctions on Russia has done. It has caused Russia and China to come together. You see, Russia had a problem when the sanctions came in place. They didn't have anyone to sell their oil and natural gas to. They were selling their natural gas to Europe, remember? The Nord Stream pipeline that somebody mysteriously blew up. Gee, I wonder who did that. That was natural gas going into Germany and going into Europe. But that got blown up. And it's funny. Everybody talks about who really did it. I think we all know the answer.
Somebody blew up the Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine. The rushing wall of water wiped out entire villages, destroyed a critical hydropower plant, and as of tonight puts the largest nuclear reactor in Europe in danger of melting down. So if this was intentional, it was not a military tactic, it was an act of terrorism. The question is, who did it? Well, let's see. The Kakhovka Dam was effectively Russian. It was built by the Russian government. It currently sits in Russian-controlled territory. The dam's reservoir supplies water to Crimea, which has been, for the last 240 years, home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Blowing up the dam may be bad for Ukraine, but it hurts Russia more. And for precisely that reason, the Ukrainian government has considered destroying it. In December, the Washington Post quoted a Ukrainian general saying his men had fired American-made rockets at the dam's floodgate as a test strike. So really, once the facts start coming in, it becomes much less of a mystery what might have happened to the dam. Any fair person would conclude that the Ukrainians probably blew it up, just as you would assume they blew up Nord Stream, the Russian natural gas pipeline, last fall. And in fact, the Ukrainians did do that, as we now know.
But then they didn't have anyone to sell their oil to because the sanctions got put in place. So Vladimir Putin made an agreement with President Xi of China. And here's what they say. They just recently got together, and here's what they talked about. We had President Xi standing in the doorway in the Grand Kremlin Palace, and he told the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, that the two of them were, and I quote, witnessing the changes that haven't been seen in more than a century, and we are pushing them together. President Xi said that about China and Russia, that they are making the changes, pushing these two countries together. Vladimir Putin said, I agree. And he responded in that way. But here's what I want you to understand. It's Vladimir Putin hailing the Chinese proposal for a settlement in Ukraine. And this is why it should be terrifying to you. This is what the West had always said, this is a non-starter. But China and Russia are making the deal. They're already making a deal for China to build a settlement in Ukraine. Let's talk about what that means. This is so dangerous. You see, everybody doesn't want to remember, and no one wants to talk about the fact that in Ukraine, they have a very important resource. That's rare earth minerals. Now, here in our country, where the Biden administration has rushed so quickly into the stupidity and the idiocracy of the Green New Deal, which would force Americans to give up their gas and diesel engine combustion vehicles by the year 2035 and be forced to drive battery-operated electric vehicles, we force ourselves to rely upon China. And here's China, very wisely, wise like a fox, sly like a serpent. They've gone in and taken advantage of the stupidity of the United States supporting this war in Ukraine and causing a fraction, causing a complete divide between the United States and Russia. And it's also caused Russia to make this agreement with China because they've got to sell their oil, their gas, and their grains and all their exports because of our sanctions, because of this war, because of saving democracy, remember? Well, here's the issue that it's created. You see, America does not control the battery market in the world. As a matter of fact, we control none of it. Let me tell you who controls it all. China. China controls it. The United States competes in roughly about 5% of the electric vehicle battery market. But yet your government leaders, Joe Biden, who some of you might have voted for, the Biden administration, they are pushing us to be reliant on batteries produced by the Chinese, by the Communist Party in China. The same China that is backing Russia, the same China that's talking about building a settlement in Ukraine, the same China, by the way, that now controls the Battleground Air Force Base in Afghanistan. You know, the one that Joe Biden walked away from? Yeah, Americans, you paid for that base to be built. You paid for all of it. And I want to remind you one more thing while we're talking about rare earth minerals. In Afghanistan, they had $1 trillion worth of rare earth minerals. That's what sits in Afghanistan. You know who's making that deal now? China. This is what the Biden administration has done to Americans. This is what the Biden administration and Democrats and the stupid people in Washington, D.C., they're selling you out every single day and forcing you to pay for it while they want to play war games and call the shots all the way across the ocean in Washington, D.C. But yet these cowards, I'm calling them cowards for a reason, because these cowards will do nothing for our border. They don't take our great, strong American military with our F-16s and our Abrams tanks and any of our powerful weapons down to the United States border at Mexico, where the Mexican cartels are responsible for killing 300 Americans every single day. No, they don't do that. I want you to watch this video of what homeless Americans look like, addicted to fentanyl and other drugs. And this is how they look, as like zombies wandering the streets. Can you believe that those are Americans? Those are people in our country. That's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's son, somebody's brother, sister. That's someone's family. But now look at them. They wander American streets like zombies because they're addicted to drugs. Drugs are such a major problem in our country. It's unbelievable. But here's the part that's hard to comprehend. 300 Americans die every single day. No, not once a week, not a month. 300 Americans die every single day. That equates to 109,500 Americans. That equates to over 109,000 deaths a year, nearly 110,000 deaths a year from fentanyl, just from fentanyl. And where does fentanyl come from? It comes from China. Chinese fentanyl is sent to Mexico, to the Mexican cartels, and they lace it in drugs and they create it in pill form in all kinds of ways. And then they traffic it across the United States border where it comes into our country and it kills these people, 300 people a day, Americans. But yet Washington, D.C., you know the only deaths they care about? Ukrainians. How many people have died in the last year in the war in Ukraine? The estimates are around 8,500 Ukrainian civilian deaths. Those are civilian deaths. Those are innocent people that have died in this war. But yet we have approximately 110,000 Americans dying a year from fentanyl that comes from China into Mexico to the cartels. But the tough guys here in Washington beat their chests and beat the drums of war for Ukraine? Can you believe that? It's shocking to me, and it's shocking to most Americans, because I know you at home. You don't work as hard as you work to make the money you make, and then every single year do your due diligence to fill out your IRS forms and make sure you pay your taxes on time, because you don't want to get in trouble with the government. I mean, we know how tough they are. We've seen it from the FBI and the Department of Justice. We know what a weaponized government looks like. No. They take your money and they care about Ukraine. Well, they don't care about our southern border. They don't care about the dangerous international criminal organizations, the Mexican cartels. They don't care about the 300 Americans dying every day. No. It's all about the Ukrainian deaths, 8,500 of them, and the fact that they will do whatever it takes to continue funding this war. But here I want you to think about this. There's consequences. Let's go back to China. Here's what you need to know just to wrap this up. China is building their military faster than any other country in human history has built their military. They are building it faster than we are building our military, and very soon they are not only are they outpacing us right now, but they will have a much stronger force than we have. That's the reality. That's what I'm told as a member of Congress very frequently. And there's another type of war that everyone is being prepared for, because the same people beating the war drums here in Washington, D.C. for Ukraine, yeah, those same people are starting to gently tap the war drums for another war, and that's with China. And they're all talking about Taiwan. Well, let me tell you what America Last policies do for us. You see, decades ago, the politicians in Washington, D.C. joined up with the big corporations, and they sent all your jobs overseas, and they forced American companies to participate in the global economy, where factories were shut down because our factories couldn't compete with the prices in factories like in China, Taiwan, India, Mexico, other countries, Korea, and so forth. So a lot of our factories in rural America were shut down and people lost their jobs. But in Taiwan, that is where the chip industry lies. That's where the microchips are made. That's where many things, things that we all rely on, like how our cell phones function, how your computers work, even important chips that go in your dishwasher, your washer and dryer, your car, your refrigerator, your microwave, your television. Every type of electronics and many other things require microchips. Well, the United States of America is completely reliant on Taiwan for that. And the war they're prepping everyone for in the future, as a matter of fact, they say possibly in the next 5 years, is a war with China over defending Taiwan. This is something that shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be preparing for a war with China. We shouldn't be preparing and fighting a war in Ukraine. What we should be doing is defending the United States of America, because that's what our Constitution says our military is for. What we should be doing with our hard-earned tax dollars is helping these homeless people, helping these people addicted to drugs, and saving 300 lives, American lives a day, not allowing them to die like zombies poisoned in the streets or in their homes. This is horrific to me, and it's absolutely wrong, and I'm calling it out today on this podcast, and I really hope you share it with your friends, because everyone needs to know the truth. No one is talking about how wrong the war is in Ukraine, but it's important to me, and I know it's important to you, and I want you to know about it. I will not vote to fund a single penny to that war. As a matter of fact, the only thing I care about is making sure that our country is safe again, making sure that our border is secure, and doing everything I can so that we can have a future for our kids, an America First future, not preparing for a war with China. I believe we should have the strongest military in the world, but just like President Trump, it should be peace through strength, not preparing for war. That's the last thing anybody wants. And I'll say this. All these big tough guys in Washington, D.C., demanding war, they're the ones that should go to the front lines, not our kids. And that's how I want to wrap this up. Okay, you guys, make sure you share this video and tune in for the next episode of Battleground MTG.